The bustling JFK International Airport was filled with the usual chaos of rolling suitcases, hurried footsteps, and muffled flight announcements. Among the travelers, Admiral Naomi Carter walked with an air of quiet confidence, dressed in a simple navy blue blouse and slacks. Her short, natural hair framed her sharp, determined features. She wasn't one for extravagance. After years in the U.S. Navy, serving in some of the most challenging missions, she preferred to keep a low profile. This was supposed to be a simple flight to Washington, D.C. Nothing special, no military escorts, just Naomi traveling alone for a high-level Pentagon meeting. But some people didn't see a highly decorated admiral when they looked at her. They just saw a black woman in an airport. Naomi approached the TSA security checkpoint, placing her small carry-on bag on the conveyor belt. She had done this countless times before. Nothing to hide, nothing to worry about. But the moment she walked through the body scanner, something changed. "Ma'am, step aside." Naomi turned her head. A tall, broad-shouldered TSA officer, his badge reading Officer Reynolds, had blocked her path. Her brow furrowed. "Is there an issue?" Another officer, a younger woman with a smirk, crossed her arms. "Random selection for additional screening," she said, voice dripping with insincerity. Naomi had seen this before, the random selection that always seemed to target people like her. She remained calm, refusing to give them the reaction they were looking for. "I'm on a tight schedule. I'd appreciate it if we could move this along." Reynolds ignored her request, signaling to two more officers. "Step over here," he ordered, his voice sharp. Naomi exhaled slowly. She had faced tougher men in war zones. This was nothing. But when they grabbed her bag and started rifling through it without explanation, she'd had enough. "I'm asking again," Naomi said, her voice firm. "Why am I being searched?" Reynolds narrowed his eyes. "You don't ask questions. You comply." The young female officer snickered. "People like you always have an attitude." Naomi's fingers tightened into a fist at her side, but she kept herself in check. Then Reynolds pulled out a sleek black wallet from her bag and opened it. And everything changed. Reynolds froze. His eyes darted to the golden crest inside the wallet, his smug smirk vanishing in an instant. The words etched into the badge gleamed under the fluorescent lights. "United States Navy, 4-star Admiral." The young female officer's jaw dropped. The crowd around them, travelers, other TSA agents, and bystanders, fell silent as they realized what was happening. Naomi took a calculated step forward, her piercing gaze locking onto Reynolds. "I suggest you rethink your actions, officer." His face turned pale. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. The female officer who had mocked her suddenly stepped back, eyes wide. Naomi didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. Her name alone carried more weight than any insult they could throw at her. "Admiral Carter?" A voice came from behind. A uniformed military officer, an Army major, stepped forward, having overheard the commotion. He saluted immediately. "Ma'am, I deeply apologize for the delay. I wasn't aware you were traveling today." Naomi returned the salute, but her expression remained cool. "Apparently, neither was your TSA team." The whispering around them grew louder. Reynolds, now visibly sweating, turned to Naomi with forced politeness. "Ma'am, I mean, Admiral, this was just a misunderstanding." Naomi tilted her head. "A misunderstanding? Tell me, Officer Reynolds, do you conduct invasive searches on all admirals, or just the ones who look like me?" His throat bobbed as he swallowed, but he had no answer. The Army major turned to Reynolds, his tone now icy. "You'll want to step away now, officer." Reynolds quickly backed off, avoiding Naomi's gaze. The female officer slipped away into the crowd, suddenly very interested in her paperwork. "You're free to go, Admiral," the major said, stepping aside respectfully. Naomi picked up her bag, dusted it off, and nodded. "Good, because I don't have time for this nonsense." And just like that, she walked away, dignified, composed, and utterly unshaken. By the time Naomi boarded her first-class seat, the incident had already made its way online. Passengers who had witnessed the event posted videos exposing the racial profiling of a decorated admiral. The news spread like wildfire. By the time Naomi landed in D.C., the Secretary of Homeland Security had already called her, demanding answers. The TSA released a formal statement, claiming the officers were under review. But the real consequences came swiftly. Within 24 hours, Officer Reynolds had been suspended indefinitely. And the young female officer? Gone. Naomi didn't smile when she heard the news. She wasn't here for revenge. She was here to make sure the next black woman at the airport didn't have to prove her worth just to board a flight. The following week, Admiral Naomi Carter stood tall at the Pentagon, surrounded by high-ranking military officials, security leaders, and reporters eager to hear her statement. The air was thick with anticipation. The airport incident had gone viral, sparking a nationwide discussion about racial profiling and systemic bias in security procedures. A journalist stepped forward, voice steady but cautious. "Admiral Carter, how do you feel about what happened to you at JFK?" Naomi paused, considering her words carefully. She wasn't one for theatrics, but she knew this was bigger than her. "What happened to me isn't unique." She met the journalist's gaze. Black travelers, people of color, and marginalized groups face unfair treatment in airports, workplaces, and society every day. The only reason my story made headlines is because I had a badge that forced them to respect me. The room was silent. "But respect shouldn't come from a title," she continued, her voice steady. "It should be automatic." Flashes from cameras flickered, journalists scribbled notes, and the weight of her words rippled beyond the walls of the Pentagon. Over the next few days, the impact was undeniable. The TSA launched an internal review of its random security checks. Airports across the country pledged to implement bias training for officers. Travelers shared their own stories of discrimination, proving Naomi's experience was far from an isolated incident. Late that evening, Naomi sat alone in her office, scrolling through her emails. Her inbox had exploded, messages from politicians, activists, and everyday citizens offering support. But one message stood out. It was from a young black woman, just 19 years old, who had watched the video of Naomi's ordeal. "Thank you for standing up for us. Because of you, I know I belong anywhere I go." Naomi exhaled slowly, staring at the screen. This wasn't just about one flight, one airport, one battle. It was about a movement. She closed her laptop, knowing her fight was far from over, and she would never stop.